Diamond is Unbreakable is the fourth part of the JoJo's series, taking place after Part 3, Stardust Crusaders. However, this part is infamous for two reasons. A couple of years ago, Part 4 was known for its awful yet humorous translations filled with errors of character names, basic grammar, and low resolution quality. Those translations were known as the Duang subs, but today, we now have an accurate manga to read. The other thing Part 4 is notorious for is the change of character designs midway through the story. Say goodbye to manliness and its Fist of the North Star inspired imagery. For now, it's all about being lean, slim, and having diamond-shaped noses. While Part 5 is popular for its expressive flamboyant attire, Part 4 will have characters go through very drastic changes. Some occur with subtlety, while others get makeovers in a span of 5 chapters from their initial debut. Regardless of these sudden changes of appearance, Part 4 still succeeds as a JoJo sequel, including a menacing new villain, new stance, new characters, and even new concepts. But like any story, Part 4 is not perfect, yet its writing surpasses Part 3. Part 4 originally debuted in Shonen Jump in 1992, yet the story setting is in 1999, taking place in a Japanese fictional town known as Morio. Kujo Jotaro arrives in this town in search of two men. One is a wanted criminal, and the other is his very young uncle, Higashikata Josuke. Once meeting Josuke, Jotaro spills the beans in saying that our married hero of battle tendency, Joseph Joestar, had an affair, and his son is Josuke, causing the Joestar family tree to go out of whack, just like King of the Hill. However, the plot here is to arrest a criminal named Ankelo, which then leads to the story's true objective and a new concept being the bow and arrow. This arrow can essentially create stand uses on people it deems worthy to possess a stand. A mysterious man wields the arrow with unknown motives, and it becomes Josuke's and Jotaro's duty to protect the peaceful town of Morio, but that is only the first plot. Part 4 has many conflicts, but they're all essentially the same thing. While Part 3 had the recurring villain of the week formula, Part 4 also has the villain of the week formula, but does it slower. The tone of Diamond is Unbreakable. It's known for feeling kind of fillerish at times, but before I try to explain that, you need to understand how repetitive JoJo can be. Basically, Araki likes to recycle his plots. I'm not sure whether he was forced to extend the story or if he just thought of some new ideas, but the point is that stuff tends to repeat itself. In Stardust Crusaders, our plot was to find Dio and fight stand users, who are each based on the tarot cards. Once the tarot card enemies were defeated, new enemies appear out of nowhere, thus repeating the same structure of the first half of Crusaders. In Part 4, our first conflict is to locate Ankelo, who then informs us of the man with the bow and arrow. So our next step is to find this mysterious man, and once we do find him, someone else steals the arrow and we have to find that person. Then finally, our main villain of Part 4 appears, being Yoshikawa Keita, but then he goes into hiding, and you guessed it, we have to find him. And if that wasn't enough, another person with an arrow shows up, and we have to find him too. That's the plot outline for Part 4, filled with endless searching which leads to some pros and cons to the series. Getting back to what I said earlier, Part 4 can sometimes feel like filler because of its structure of constantly searching for people. As Josuke and Jotaro search for the whereabouts of the first 3 villains of Part 4, they come across a couple of foes who, through the power of manly friendship, manage to turn these villains into good guys. Rinse and repeat this formula and you have a main cast of about 10 main characters and a couple of recurring ones too. While not every character debuts as a villain, the tone of Part 4 borders on slice of life, but this allows for more growth and interactions among the characters. Unlike Part 3, Part 4 is set in one place and doesn't really have the fast-paced action Stardust Crusaders was known for. This setup does aid the character writing from beginning to end, but also works as a double-edged sword in its overall content. For example, there are some fights and encounters in which you wonder, was there any point to it? Everyone has their own opinion on JoJo as a whole, whether it's the characters or the parts, but I can certainly see people getting bored of Diamond's Unbreakable. There are some chapters which don't affect the story in any way other than some humorous scenarios, resembling the Oingo and Boingo scenes from Stardust Crusaders. Obvious examples are the Superfly battle, the I Am an Alien story, and Let's Go for Italian. But even battles such as Harvest, the Paper Rock Scissors Boy, and Enigma don't really move the story forward. Again, Part 4 is a very subjective topic among JoJo fans. Some people really like these stories while others don't, but it's still interesting to read. Hopefully, whenever the anime for Part 4 is announced, those very same battles will be more appealing in anime form. The masculine charm the series contained from parts 1, 2, and 3 gradually vanishes, but the characters play a bigger role in the actual conflict. Josuke initially debuts as a fusion of Joseph and Jotaro, bearing his dad's sense of humor and easygoing nature, while expressing an angry and manly disposition with a delinquent attire, much like Jotaro. In fact, there are some panels where their faces are so alike that it feels that the series had two Jotaros. However, as the story progresses, Josuke loses his muscular build and becomes less stoic, essentially turning into this generation's Joseph Joestar. He's a good main lead who develops maturity with every battle, but also has his share of immaturity, which is always a good laugh. Now sporting a white coat, Jotaro plays a Seppeli role, acting as a mentor for Josuke, Koichi, and even a bit with Okuyasu. He's more talkative here than in part 3, but like his predecessor Joseph Joestar, Jotaro is nerfed. Despite his stand data file stating his ability working for 5 seconds, Jotaro in parts 4 and 6 states that he can only do it for 2 seconds, which always bugged me. Despite his small appearances in part 4, Jotaro managed to steal the spotlight in certain chapters, displaying his wisdom and experience as an adult. Joseph Joestar also returns, amending things with his son, in some of the most affectionate family bonding of the series. However, Joseph's appearance in part 4 leads to a small plot hole. Originally, he's brought in to locate Red Hot Chili Peppers with his stand Hermit Purple. In that case, why wasn't he used to find Yoshikawa Keita or the location of the Golden Arrow? The answer is Araki fucked up and didn't want to end the story that quickly. Okuyasu serves as Josuke's best friend, who honestly doesn't have too many scenes in the story. The only crucial moments he had were his initial debut, the battle with Red Hot Chili Peppers, and the final confrontation with Yoshikawa Keita. While he is constantly present, he just doesn't add much other than a few manly moments or a lot of gags. Koichi is interestingly inspired by Dragon Ball, specifically Gohan's development during this fight with Cell. Even Koichi's stand is reminiscent of Cell. Koichi is a dynamic character who changes both physically and mentally. While he isn't a favorite of mine, Koichi is the most developed character in part 4. Araki definitely put a lot of care when writing about Koichi's character. Rohan has often been labeled as Araki's self-insert into JoJo, as the character is a mangaka. He begins as a selfish villain, and by the end of the story, he's still a selfish person, but likable. It's his rude demeanor that makes him stand out from every JoJo character. You can describe him as a prick, a jerk, a dick, or even an asshole, but deep inside, he does share some genuine traits of kindness, and is friendly to certain people. But above everything else, he is dependable, and once you get past his rough exterior, you may even call him your friend. Last of the main characters would be a new topic for JoJo, being ghosts, such as the deceased spirit Reimi, who was slain by a murderer. She asks for solace by catching the man responsible for numerous kills, which then leads to the final piece of this review, the villains. In part 3, the main villain Dio Brando was known for being in the shadows, and essentially acting as the final boss of the story. So for a majority of part 3, Dio was not present, giving him very little screen time. Part 4 begins the same way, as our first villain is in constant silhouette, intimidating others with his charisma, much like Dio. This trend repeats itself again with Akira, but in a different manner. When our third main villain makes his debut, he doesn't appear in a silhouette like Shadow Dio, but instead speaks through his stand, making his true human form a mystery. This stand villain entrance will later be used with the main villains of part 5 and 6, where the stand appears first and the actual stand user shows up later. For whatever reason, part 4 villains are known to be very disturbing, making it questionable whether these characters could be allowed in Shonen Jump. Right off the bat, there's Angelo, who sexually assaulted boys and ripped the dick off. Almost every villain in part 4 has this twisted and disgusting demeanor that borders into insanity, such as Rohan eating a spider, Angelo biting a man's face, Kira's hand collection fetish, and Yukaku being an obsessive, stalking, and kidnapping yandere, a very early yandere for the 1990s. But just like part 3, a lot of these villains show off their powers as very intimidating, but by the end of the fight, they just turn into cowardly little bitches. That is, with the exception of part 4's staple villain, Yoshikawa Keita, a killer who refers to dead women's hands as his girlfriends, a man who always behaves with sophistication, but most important of all, he can make people explode by touching them with his stand killer queen. So in other words, you are shocked? In contrast to Dio, Yoshikawa Keita appears often in Part 4 and not just for the final battle. A benefit of this slice-of-life structure is giving our characters time to develop, even our main baddie. Keita has more opportunities to be observed by the audience and even witness his thought process in the pursuit of a peaceful lifestyle. Like Dio, they both have a manly demeanor and can back up their threats with force while remaining bold and charismatic. Yoshikage is not as flamboyant or ambitious as Dio, but he still remains top tier among JoJo fans and anime villains, even inspiring Togashi with his bomber-related villains. In conclusion, Part 4 has an incredible ending filled with such great irony, but also manages to give our characters a much-needed spotlight, bringing forth a more emotional side to JoJo. Or, as I like to call it, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 4 Drama is Unbreakable. While it may be a long story and can be slow at times, there's definitely something for everyone in Diamond is Unbreakable, a tale about the protection of peace, the execution of evil, and the eternal rest of the departed. I'm the Anime Hero, and if you like this video, be sure to watch my anime presentations of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure on my main channel.